Fleet Commander Vexthul stood frozen on his platform like a crystal statue, his forearms hanging uselessly at his sides as he stared at the impossible scene before him. His perfect chamber, the heart of his magnificent warship, had been turned into a human fortress in less than 15 minutes. The elegant flowing walls were scarred with blast marks from his own guards' weapons, turned against them by creatures he had dismissed as primitive insects. The bioneural interfaces that connected him to his ship flickered with chaotic patterns as human hands worked controls that no alien had ever imagined could be compromised. Jake Morrison stood at the base of the platform, looking up at the tall alien commander with calm, steady eyes. Behind him, his team worked with the smooth efficiency of professional soldiers, securing their position and consolidating their control over systems they had never seen before today. It should have been impossible for 5 humans to seize control of an alien warship crewed by 1,000 Zephyrians, but here they were, proving that impossible was just another word for something no one had tried yet. "You cannot hold this ship," Vexthul said, his musical voice struggling to maintain its usual melodic tones. "My crew will retake it. My fleet will come to my aid. You have doomed yourselves for nothing." Danny Rodriguez looked up from the bioneural interface he had been studying, his hands still moving across alien controls with growing confidence. "Actually, Commander, your crew can't do anything right now. I've locked them out of all critical systems using their own security protocols. As for your fleet, well," he gestured toward Kelly Wright, who was working at the communication station with a look of intense concentration. "I'm broadcasting a message to your other ships," Kelly said without looking up from her work, "using your own command frequencies and your commander's personal authorization codes. I'm telling them that you're conducting a special training exercise and that they should maintain their positions until further notice." Vexthul's silver eyes widened with something that might have been the first genuine surprise he had felt in decades. "Impossible. You cannot know our protocols. You cannot speak our language properly." "You're right about the language," Kelly admitted with a slight smile, "but your translation systems work both ways. I've been learning to modulate human speech into Zephyrian harmonic patterns for the past 3 days. It's not perfect, but it's good enough to buy us some time." Lisa Parker, who had been quietly reinforcing their defensive positions, looked up from her work. "Captain, we've got movement in the outer corridors. Looks like some of their security teams are trying to organize a response." "Let them try," Pete Collins said from his position near the main entrance. "They're still thinking like ceremonial guards instead of soldiers. They'll come at us in formation following their ancient protocols and we'll cut them down like wheat." Jake nodded, but his expression remained serious. Taking the command center had been the easy part. Holding it against an entire ship full of angry aliens would be much harder, especially since they couldn't kill their way through 1,000 crew members with just 5 people and limited ammunition. "Danny, can you access their internal communication system?" Jake asked. "Already done," the engineer replied. "Their bioneural network is actually quite elegant once you understand how it works. Everything is connected to everything else, which makes it vulnerable but also gives us control over systems they never expected anyone to compromise." "Good. Patch me through to the entire ship. I want every Zephyrian on this vessel to hear what I have to say." Danny's fingers danced over the alien controls, and suddenly Jake's voice was being carried through every corridor and compartment of the great warship. When he spoke, his words were calm and reasonable, the voice of a man who was completely in control of the situation. "This is Captain Morrison of the United Human Systems, speaking to all Zephyrian crew members aboard this vessel. Your commander and your senior officers are unharmed and will remain so as long as you follow instructions. We have taken control of your command center and your ship's primary systems. Any attempt to retake this area by force will result in the immediate destruction of your bioneural network and the permanent disabling of your vessel." He paused, letting that sink in before continuing. "We are not here to conquer your ship or harm your people. We are here to deliver a message. The message is simple. Humanity is not another primitive species for you to casually dominate. We are survivors from a world that taught us to fight against impossible odds and win through determination and ingenuity. Attack our colonies, threaten our people, or attempt to force us into your empire, and you will discover what humans are truly capable of." Jake looked directly at Vexthul as he spoke the next words, making sure the alien commander understood every syllable. "We are going to return control of this ship to Fleet Commander Vexthul in exactly 1 hour. During that time, He is going to issue new orders to his fleet, orders that will withdraw all Zephyrian forces from human space and establish a proper diplomatic protocol for future contact between our species. These orders will be based on mutual respect rather than assumed superiority. Vexthul found his voice at last, though it came out as more of a musical screech than his usual melodic tones. You dare to dictate terms to the Zephyrian Empire? We have ruled this sector for millennia. We do not negotiate with inferior species. Jake's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Commander, in the past hour you've watched 5 humans take control of your most advanced warship using nothing but tactical thinking and improvised solutions. You've seen us turn your own technology against you and outmaneuver guards who outnumbered us 20-1. At what point do you plan to stop calling us inferior? The alien commander's crystal skin seemed to lose even more of its luster, as the implications of what had happened finally began to sink in. His empire's greatest strength, their advanced technology and overwhelming superiority, had been turned into weaknesses by enemies who refused to be intimidated and refused to surrender. What you have done here is impossible, Vexthul said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. No, Jake replied calmly. What we've done here is necessary. You came into our space with threats and ultimatums expecting us to roll over like every other species you've encountered. Instead, you found humans. We don't roll over, Commander. We roll up our sleeves and get to work. For the next hour, the impossible standoff continued. Jake Morrison and his team held the command center of an alien warship against a 1,000-strong crew through a combination of superior tactics, captured technology, and sheer audacity. They proved that advanced technology was useless without the will and skill to use it properly, and that numerical superiority meant nothing if those numbers couldn't be organized effectively. When the hour was up, Jake personally restored command authority to Vexthul, but only after the alien commander had transmitted the promised orders to his fleet. The Zephyrian warships would withdraw from human space and establish proper diplomatic channels for future contact. Most importantly, they would carry word back to their empire that humanity was not just another species to be casually conquered. As the human team prepared to return to their own ship, Vexthul stood silently on his platform, staring at the creatures who had accomplished the impossible. Finally, he spoke, his voice thoughtful rather than arrogant for the first time since they had met. What are you? He asked quietly. Jake Morrison paused at the entrance to the chamber and looked back at the alien commander. We're human, he said simply. We're what happens when evolution takes place on a world where only the adaptable survive. We're what you get when a species learns that the universe doesn't owe them anything, and that everything worth having must be fought for and earned. He walked away then, followed by his team, leaving behind a ship full of aliens who would never again make the mistake of underestimating humanity. The Zephyrian Empire would learn to treat humans as equals rather than subjects, not because they wanted to, but because 5 humans on an alien warship had taught them that some species simply could not be conquered. And in the years that followed, when other alien empires heard the story of what had happened aboard the Keth Moran, they too would learn to approach humanity with respect rather than arrogance. Because the first time humans boarded an alien warship, they proved that no technology was superior to human determination, no empire was stronger than human adaptability, and no species was more dangerous than one that refused to surrender. The third morning aboard the Keth Moran dawned like any other, with soft alien lights gradually brightening along the corridor walls and gentle harmonic tones signaling the start of another ship's day. The Zephyrian guards came for the humans exactly on schedule, their crystal faces showing no emotion as they led the 5 prisoners back through the flowing passages to Fleet Commander Vexthul's grand chamber. Jake Morrison walked calmly beside his captors, his hands relaxed at his sides and his face showing nothing but polite interest. Inside, however, every nerve was alert and ready. Today would decide whether humanity remained free or became another collection in the Zephyrian Empire's catalog of conquered species. Today, 5 humans would either make history or become footnotes in someone else's story. The grand chamber looked exactly the same as before, all impossible architecture and flowing surfaces. But now Jake saw it through the eyes of a soldier about to go into battle. He counted 17 guards positioned around the room, noted that most of the Zephyrian officers were clustered near the central platform where Vexthul held court, identified 3 main exits and 2 that might be emergency passages. Most importantly, he saw that his team had unconsciously positioned themselves exactly where they needed to be. Lisa Parker stood near the main entrance, her casual pose hiding the fact that she was blocking the most likely route for reinforcements. Pete Collins had placed himself close to the largest group of guards, his relaxed stance concealing coiled readiness. Kelly Wright was near what she had identified as the main communication panel, while Danny Rodriguez had positioned himself next to the bio-neural interface that seemed to control most of the chamber's systems. Fleet Commander Vex Thule rose from his flowing throne-like chair, his forearms spreading wide in a gesture that was probably meant to look welcoming, but came across as possessive. His silver eyes reflected the chamber's soft lights as he looked down at the humans with what might have been pity. "I trust you have considered our generous offer," Vex Thule said, his musical voice filling the space between them. "Your government has had time to understand the reality of your situation. What answer do you bring me?" Jake stepped forward slightly, his hands still relaxed, his voice still calm. "We've considered your offer very carefully, Commander. We've learned a lot about your empire and your methods. We understand exactly what you're offering us." "Excellent," Vex Thule said, clearly expecting immediate surrender. "Then you accept our protection and guidance. Your species will be incorporated into our empire as a client race, and this unpleasant business can be concluded." "Actually," Jake said, his voice still perfectly polite, "we have a counteroffer." This seemed to confuse the alien commander. His crystal features shifted into what might have been a frown. "Counteroffer? You are in no position to negotiate, human. You have one small ship and 5 individuals. We have a battle fleet and the backing of an empire that spans 100 worlds. Jake nodded as if considering this. "That's true. But you're forgetting something important about humans, Commander. We don't surrender. We adapt." The words seemed harmless enough, but they were the signal the human team had been waiting for. In the space of a single heartbeat, everything changed. Danny Rodriguez's hand flashed to the bio-neural interface panel he had been studying for 3 days. His fingers, trained in human electronics but guided by alien observation, found the harmonic frequency controls and sent a cascade of conflicting signals through the ship's living nervous system. The effect was immediate and devastating. Lights flickered throughout the chamber. The flowing patterns on the walls stuttered and froze. And somewhere in the depths of the great ship, systems that had run smoothly for centuries began to fail. Kelly Wright moved at the same instant, her communications training guiding her to the harmonic transmitters that connected this chamber to the rest of the ship. She triggered a feedback loop that turned the Zephyrians' own elegant technology against them, sending waves of sonic disruption through every communication channel on the vessel. The alien guards reacted exactly as Pete Collins had predicted they would. Instead of adapting to the unexpected crisis, they followed their ancient protocols and moved in formation toward predetermined positions. This made them perfect targets for a human who had learned to fight dirty on a dozen different worlds. Pete moved through them like a predator among prey, using their own ceremonial weapons against them and their confusion against their training. Lisa Parker took control of the chamber's main entrance with military precision, using overturned furniture and disabled guard stations to create a defensive position that would funnel any reinforcements into a killing zone. The Zephyrians had never designed their beautiful chamber for warfare, and their flowing architecture worked against them when someone who understood tactics took control of it. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison walked calmly toward the central platform where Vex Thule stood frozen in shock. The alien commander's forearms waved frantically as he tried to activate controls that no longer responded, tried to call for help through communication systems that no longer worked, tried to understand how 5 primitive humans had turned his perfect ship into chaos. "You cannot do this," Vex Thule said, his musical voice cracking with harmonics of distress. "We are the Zephyrian Empire. We have ruled this sector for 3,000 years. You are insects, primitives, barely capable of spaceflight." Jake reached the platform and looked up at the tall alien with calm eyes. "That's your problem, Commander. You've been ruling for so long that you forgot how to fight. You've been dealing with species that surrendered so easily that you never learned what happens when someone refuses to give up." Around them, the chamber was full of organized chaos. The human team worked with the efficiency of soldiers who had trained together and trusted each other completely. They secured positions, disabled systems, and neutralized threats with the kind of practiced competence that came from years of facing impossible odds and surviving anyway. Danny had completely compromised the ship's bio-neural network, turning the Zephyrians' greatest advantage into their fatal weakness. Kelly had seized control of all communications, isolating the command center from the rest of the ship and preventing Vexthul from calling for reinforcements. Pete had systematically disarmed or disabled every guard in the chamber, using their own ceremonial training against them. Lisa had fortified their position and created multiple fallback points in case the situation changed. In less than 10 minutes, 5 humans had taken control of the most advanced warship in the Zephyrian fleet, using nothing but tactics, training, and the kind of creative thinking that came from evolving on a world where adaptation meant survival. Vexthul stared down at Jake Morrison with something that might have been the first real fear he had felt in centuries. "What do you want?" Jake smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "What we want is simple, Commander. We want you to understand that humanity is not another species you can casually conquer. We want you to learn that there are consequences for threatening our people. Most of all, we want you to remember this day every time you think about expanding your empire into human space." The alien commander's crystal skin had lost some of its luster, and his silver eyes were wide with something that looked like panic. "You will never escape this ship. My fleet will destroy you all rather than let you succeed." "Maybe," Jake said calmly, "but right now you have bigger problems than us escaping. Right now you need to worry about us not giving you your ship back." The quarters they gave the humans were as beautiful and impractical as everything else on the alien ship. The rooms flowed together like water, all curves and soft surfaces with walls that glowed gently and furniture that seemed to grow out of the floor. There were no hard edges anywhere, no corners to hide in, no straight lines that would block a line of sight. It was like living inside a piece of art, but it was also like living in a fishbowl where everything could be watched. Jake Morrison sat on something that was probably a bed, though it felt more like a warm cloud, and looked around at his team. They had been given rooms next to each other, which the Zephyrians probably thought was generous hospitality. In reality, it let the humans gather and plan without having to move around the ship. "Report," Jake said quietly, knowing that their hosts were probably listening but not caring anymore. If the aliens wanted to hear human voices, let them. They would not understand what they were really hearing. Lisa Parker spoke first, her tactical mind already working on the problems they faced. "Their security is all for show. The guards follow set patterns, probably the same ones they've used for centuries. They don't scan for threats or watch blind spots. They're ceremonial soldiers, not warriors." Danny Rodriguez nodded and added his own observations. "Their technology is impressive but vulnerable. Everything runs on bio-neural networks using harmonic frequencies. Disrupt the harmonics and you could crash their whole system. Also, they have central control nodes instead of backup systems. Take out the brain and the body dies. The ship itself is more like a living creature than a machine," Kelly Wright said. "All their communications, power, life support, everything flows through the same network. They've never had to worry about battle damage or system failures. One good shock to their neural network and this whole ship could be paralyzed." Pete Collins was cleaning his fingernails with a small knife, looking relaxed and casual. "Their guards are dancers, not fighters. Pretty weapons that probably couldn't punch through human body armor. They've never fought anyone who fought back. If trouble starts, they'll freeze up instead of adapting." Jake listened to each report and felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. The Zephyrians were powerful, but they were also soft, like a sword that had never been used and had lost its edge. They had ruled through fear and superior technology for so long that they had forgotten how to actually fight. "What about numbers?" he asked. "That's the interesting part," Lisa said. "This ship is huge, but it's undermanned. I'd guess maybe 1,000 crew for a vessel that should need 10,000. They rely on automation and computer control for everything. Fewer people, fewer chances for rebellion or independent thinking. Or fewer people to fight back when someone takes control," Pete added with a thin smile. They talked quietly through the night, sharing observations and building a picture of their enemy. The Zephyrians were not evil exactly, just supremely arrogant. They had been the biggest fish in their pond for so long that they could not imagine anything threatening them. They ruled through spectacle and intimidation, not through the hard business of war. The next morning, alien guards came to escort them back to Vexthul's chamber. The humans went peacefully, but Jake noticed that his team moved differently now. They walked with purpose instead of confusion, their eyes taking in details instead of just staring at the alien architecture. They had stopped being tourists and started being soldiers. The grand chamber looked the same as before, all flowing walls and impossible ceiling, but now Jake could see it with tactical eyes. He counted the guards, noted the positions of the exits, identified which of the elegant decorations might actually be control panels or weapon systems. The Zephyrians had built themselves a temple, not a command center. Fleet Commander Vex Thule stood on his platform like an actor on a stage, his forearms gesturing gracefully as he spoke. I trust you rested well, humans. Today we will discuss terms for your species' integration into our empire. We're listening, Jake said, though he was actually watching. Lisa was positioned near the main entrance, Pete close to the guard station, Kelly by what looked like a communication panel, and Danny near something that was probably a power distribution node. If anyone had been paying attention, they might have noticed that the humans had spread out to cover the room's key positions. Vex Thule activated his holographic display again, showing star charts and fleet positions. Your species will be granted protected status within our empire. You will be allowed to keep your existing colonies under our guidance. Your military will be disbanded as it is no longer necessary. Your technology will be evaluated and approved for continued use where appropriate. The alien commander gestured to show human space being carved up between different Zephyrian administrative zones. Earth itself was marked with a special symbol that probably meant direct imperial control. It was a generous offer by Zephyrian standards, Jake was sure. They would be allowed to live as long as they accepted permanent slavery. What if we refuse? Jake asked. Then your colonies will be pacified by force, Vex Thule said without emotion. Your ships will be destroyed, your planets blockaded. Your species reduced to a manageable population. It is not personal, humans. It is simply policy. The other Zephyrian officers made musical sounds of agreement. They had probably had this conversation 100 times with 100 different species. To them it was just routine, like processing paperwork or updating a database. They could not imagine that their latest victims might have other ideas. I need time to think about this, Jake said. This is a big decision for my species. Vex Thule nodded graciously. Of course. You may have until tomorrow morning to consult with your government. Though I should warn you that delay serves no purpose. Our sensors show no human reinforcements approaching, and your single ship poses no threat to us. Accept our generous offer now or face the consequences later. Jake bowed slightly, playing the role of the intimidated primitive. Thank you for your patience, Commander. May we return to our quarters to consider your words? Naturally. Vex Thule waved one hand and the guards moved forward to escort the humans away. Rest well, little humans. Tomorrow you will make the most important choice in your species' history. As they walked through the flowing corridors back to their rooms, Jake caught Pete's eye and nodded slightly. The big Marine sergeant gave an almost invisible nod back. The signal was passed eye to eye through the team. They had seen enough, learned enough, planned enough. Tomorrow would not go the way the Zephyrians expected. Back in their quarters, the humans sat quietly for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Lisa spoke into the silence. They really think we're going to surrender, don't they? They've never met anyone who wouldn't, Danny said. Their whole system is based on overwhelming power and inevitable submission. They can't imagine resistance that doesn't just give up when faced with superior force. Kelly was looking out through the transparent wall at the stars beyond. They're going to learn something tomorrow about humans that they won't like. What's that? Jake asked. She turned back to the group with a cold smile. That we don't surrender. We adapt. Pete was checking his gear, making sure everything was ready for what was coming. Commander, are we really going to try this? Take over an entire alien warship with 5 people? Jake Morrison looked around at his team, at these 4 people who had volunteered to follow him into the unknown. They were scared but determined, outgunned but not outthought, facing impossible odds but not backing down. They were, in other words, perfectly human. Yes, he said simply. We're going to show these aliens what happens when you threaten humanity. They wanted to see what kind of creatures we really are. Tomorrow they'll find out. Fleet Commander Vex Thule looked down at the 5 humans standing in his grand chamber, like a teacher examining insects under a microscope. His forearms moved in slow, graceful patterns as he spoke, and his crystal skin caught the light and threw it back in rainbow colors. Around him stood other Zephyrian officers, all tall and elegant, all watching the humans with those big silver eyes. You are a curious species, Vex Thule said, his musical voice filling the huge room. So small and soft, yet you have somehow learned to travel between stars. How did creatures like you manage such a thing? Captain Jake Morrison kept his face calm and his voice steady. We learned by necessity. Our world taught us to adapt or die. This seemed to amuse the alien commander. He made that sound that might have been laughter again. Adapt to what? You come from a single world with a single sun. We have ruled 100 systems for 3,000 of your years. What could you possibly have learned that we have not mastered? Jake did not answer directly. Instead, he looked around the chamber, taking in every detail. The walls were covered in what looked like living art, patterns that moved and flowed like water. The ceiling disappeared into darkness far above, and the floor under their feet felt warm and slightly soft, like they were standing on skin. Everything was beautiful in an alien way, but it was also completely impractical for fighting or defense. Lisa Parker was doing the same thing, her tactical training making her catalog every weakness she could see. The Zephyrian guards stood in perfect formation, but they never moved their heads to scan for threats. Their weapons were works of art, all flowing lines and glowing crystals, but they looked like they would break if dropped. Most importantly, there were not very many guards for such a big ship. These aliens relied on their technology to keep them safe, not on soldiers and tactics. Tell us about your empire, Jake said. How do you keep peace across so many worlds? Bexthol gestured with two of his hands, and the air above them filled with holographic images. Jake could see star systems and planets, trade routes, and military positions. It was exactly the kind of information that would be classified on any human ship, but the alien commander showed it freely. We keep peace through strength, Bexthol said proudly. When a new species develops space travel, we visit them. We show them our power and offer them a choice. Join our empire as a protected species, or face the consequences. Most choose wisely. The holographic display showed human colonies and ships, all marked with symbols that Jake could not read, but which probably meant target. The aliens had been watching humanity for a long time, learning about their defenses and weaknesses. That should have been frightening, but instead it made Jake angry. These creatures thought they could just walk into human space and demand surrender. Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez was studying the holographic projectors with great interest. The technology was impressive, but he could see how it worked. The Zephyrians used some kind of bioneural interface, connecting their minds directly to their machines. It was elegant and efficient, but it also meant their technology was designed around their specific biology. A human could probably not use it, but more importantly, it could probably be disrupted by something the aliens would not expect. Your technology is very advanced, Danny said, trying to sound impressed rather than analytical. How do you power ships this large? Bexthol preened at the compliment. Our ships are grown, not built. They are living things in a way with bioneural networks that think and respond. The power flows through channels like blood through veins. It is far superior to your crude mechanical systems. Danny nodded and asked more questions, each one designed to sound like simple curiosity while actually mapping the alien power grid. The Zephyrians answered freely, apparently seeing no danger in educating primitive humans about their superior technology. Kelly Wright was listening to everything with the ear of a communications specialist. The Zephyrian language was based on harmonic frequencies like music made into speech. Their translation devices were good, but they had to work hard to turn the alien music into human words. More importantly, she noticed that all of the alien technology seemed to use the same harmonic principles. If someone could disrupt those frequencies, it might cause serious problems for their systems. Your language is beautiful, Kelly said during a pause in the technical discussion. It sounds like singing. All things have their proper harmonies, replied one of the other alien officers. Our ships, our tools, our weapons, all are tuned to the frequencies of order and peace. Chaos and discord cannot exist in harmony. Kelly filed that information away. Harmony was beautiful, but it was also fragile. Human music had taught her that sometimes you needed discord to make the harmony meaningful. Maybe the same was true of alien technology. Sergeant Pete Collins was the quietest of the group, but his eyes never stopped moving. He watched the guards, studied their movements, counted their weapons. The Zephyrians moved like dancers, everything choreographed and beautiful. They had probably never been in a real fight, the kind where someone was trying to kill them with whatever came to hand. Their training was all ceremony and no practical combat. The chamber they stood in was designed to impress, not defend. The high ceiling and open spaces would be perfect for an enemy to move around in. The flowing walls had no cover or defensive positions. Even the platform where Vexthal stood was more like a stage than a command post. These aliens had been in charge for so long that they had forgotten what it felt like to be threatened. "You have beautiful soldiers," Pete said, nodding toward the guards. "Do they train often?" "Train?" Vexthal seemed confused by the question. "They are educated in the proper forms and ceremonies. What more would they need? Our enemies surrender when they see our power. There is no need for crude violence." Pete nodded respectfully, but inside he was thinking that these aliens had no idea what crude violence really looked like. They had never fought someone who refused to surrender, never faced an enemy who would rather die than give up. They thought war was about showing off fancy weapons and making speeches. The conversation continued for hours, with Vexthal explaining the greatness of Zephyrian civilization, and the humans asking careful questions. To the aliens, it probably looked like primitive creatures trying to understand their betters. In reality, it was a professional intelligence-gathering operation, with each human collecting different pieces of the puzzle. By the time Vexthal finally dismissed them to guest quarters, the humans had learned more about alien technology and tactics than the Zephyrians would ever have shared with an equal enemy. The aliens' arrogance was their weakness, making them blind to the fact that they were being studied by soldiers who had learned war on a world where only the smart and adaptable survived. "Rest well, little humans," Vexthal said as the guards led them away. "Tomorrow we will discuss your species' future in our empire." Jake Morrison smiled politely and thanked the alien commander for his hospitality. Inside, he was already planning how to turn the Zephyrians' greatest strengths into their fatal weaknesses. The first rule of human warfare was simple: know your enemy better than he knows himself. After today, Jake thought they were well on their way to doing exactly that. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Discovery and watched the massive alien ship block out the stars ahead of them. The thing was huge, maybe 10 times bigger than his own vessel, and it looked like nothing he had ever seen before. Where human ships were built with straight lines and metal plates, this alien warship seemed to flow like water frozen in space. Its hull curved and twisted in ways that hurt his eyes to follow, and strange lights pulsed along its surface like a heartbeat. "Sir, they're hailing us again," said Communications Officer Kelly Wright from her station. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the worry underneath. They had been trying to talk to the aliens for 3 hours now, ever since the massive ship had appeared out of nowhere and trapped them with some kind of energy field. "Put them through," Jake said. He straightened his uniform and tried to look calm. Inside, his heart was beating fast. This was it, humanity's first real contact with another intelligent species, and it was not going the way anyone had planned. The view screen flickered and showed the face of something that was definitely not human. The alien had 4 arms and skin that looked like it was made of blue crystal. Its eyes were large and silver, and when it spoke, the sound was like music played too slow. The translation computer worked hard to turn the alien words into English. "I am Fleet Commander Vexthal of the Zephyrian Empire," the alien said. "You have entered space that belongs to us. Your ship will come aboard our vessel for proper processing." Jake kept his face blank even though he did not like the sound of that. "I am Captain Morrison of the United Human Systems. We are explorers, not invaders. We mean no harm to you or your people." Vexthal made a sound that might have been laughter. "Harm? Little human, you could not harm us if you tried. Your technology is primitive and your species is young. You will come aboard our ship so we can decide what to do with you and your kind." The alien commander gestured with one of his 4 hands, and the transmission ended. Jake looked around his bridge at his crew. They all had the same worried look on their faces. Being invited aboard an alien warship did not sound like the kind of invitation you could refuse. "Sir, what do we do?" asked Lieutenant Commander Lisa Parker. She was his tactical officer, a tough woman who had served in the Outer Colony Wars. If she was worried, then this was serious. Jake thought for a moment. They could try to run, but their engines were being held by some kind of alien technology. They could try to fight, but their weapons would probably bounce off that massive ship like rocks thrown at a mountain. That left only one choice: we go aboard their ship, he said. But we go ready for anything. He turned to his crew. "Lisa, Danny, Kelly, Pete, you're with me. Everyone else stays here and keeps the ship ready to move fast if things go wrong." Chief Engineer Danny Rodriguez stood up from his station. He was a small man, but good with machines and brave when it mattered. "Sir, what if this is a trap?" Then we spring it and see what happens, Jake said. But we go in with our eyes open. This might be our only chance to learn about these aliens and their technology. If we're going to survive this, we need to know what we're dealing with. Marine Sergeant Pete Collins checked his sidearm and nodded. Ready when you are, sir. Pete was a big man with scars on his hands and a calm way of talking that made everyone feel safer. If trouble started, he would know what to do. The alien ship sent a small craft to pick them up. It was as strange as the big ship, all curves and flowing lines with no sharp edges anywhere. When it docked with the Discovery, Jake could hear a sound like singing coming from its hull. The airlock opened and 2 alien guards stepped through. They were tall and graceful, with the same crystal skin as their commander. They carried weapons that looked more like art than guns. You will come with us, one of them said in that musical voice. Do not bring weapons or devices that might disturb our ship's harmony. Jake and his team left their obvious weapons behind, but kept their standard gear. The aliens did not seem to care about their communicators or the small tools they carried. Maybe they thought human technology was too primitive to matter. The ride to the alien ship was short, but gave them their first close look at the enemy vessel. Up close, it was even more impressive and strange. The hull was covered in patterns that seemed to move when you looked at them. Lights flowed along channels that looked like veins or rivers. The whole ship seemed alive somehow. It's beautiful, Kelly whispered as they approached a docking bay that opened like a flower. Beautiful things can still kill you, Lisa muttered back. Stay sharp. The docking bay was huge and filled with smaller alien ships. Everything was the same flowing style, all curves and organic shapes. The air tasted different here, cleaner somehow, but with a metallic taste that made Jake's teeth ache. The gravity was lighter too, making each step feel like a small jump. More alien guards met them at the airlock. These ones wore what looked like armor made from the same crystal material as their skin. They moved with perfect coordination, like dancers who had practiced the same routine 1,000 times. They led the humans through corridors that curved and twisted like the inside of a seashell. Jake tried to memorize the path, but it was hard. Every corridor looked the same, all flowing walls and soft lights. There were no straight lines anywhere. No corners or edges like human ships had. It was like walking through the inside of a living creature. They passed other aliens in the corridors. All of them stopped to stare at the humans with those big silver eyes. Some made musical sounds to each other that the translation devices could not handle. Jake got the feeling they were not saying nice things. They think we're pets, Lisa said quietly. Let them, Jake replied. Pets get underestimated. Finally, they reached a large chamber with a high ceiling that seemed to stretch up forever. The walls were covered in moving patterns that hurt to look at directly. At the center of the room, on a platform that seemed to grow out of the floor, stood Fleet Commander Vexthal. He was even bigger in person, maybe 8 feet tall, and his crystal skin reflected the room's strange lights. Welcome aboard the Kethmaran, he said, in that slow, musical voice. Now we will see what kind of creatures you humans really are.